Looking forward to this conversation. Matt, maybe the best place to start, let's kind of start with like, your story and like your journey and how you sort of got to, where you are today.
Okay, how far back do we want to go? I guess I could start with college a bit because that's always an interesting one. What is the purpose of the education system? Is to bring out your potential, set you on a path so you can generate wealth and obviously add value to society. The value exchange. You give value to society, you get value in exchange. So I was in the education system and I was doing the humanities. I was doing musics, English, literature, stuff like this, and I wasn't really getting educated well. Now, I didn't understand at the time exactly what was going on, but I had this good instinct that I was not getting taught properly. And later on, I kind of found that I think the education system was a little bit messed up. But back then, it was much more primitive, much more simple. I was a young dude, and I felt that I wasn't good enough, as we all do. I was sort of saying to myself, "Oh, I look it up to all my idols, great speakers, great writers, great singers." And they're amazing people. And I think I was remember looking at them and thinking, that artist, that writer, that singer, that fighter, that athlete, I define them. We categorize them by the thing they do, that he's a writer, and that's a skill. We give him a special name because of a skill he possesses. And I realized I was in college and I was having no skills being taught to me. I was sitting around and I would go into these classes and they'd hand me Marxist theory, they'd hand me critical theory from Derrida, they'd hand me Judith Butler, they'd hand me all this stuff. They'd hand me this information and get me to sit down and to consume and read the books and then splurge out the information again. I guess the skill might have been memory and regurgitation, but I realized that it wasn't the skills I was looking for. I didn't look up to any filing cabinets, I didn't have any heroes that I looked up in that way. Instead, it was all these people who had action, who had things that they were doing. And I was like, man, there's no this university that's teaching me this stuff. And I don't think I've ever had it in my life. I've never had it in any part of the education system ever once. There's always been these information people. And so I decided actually to drop out. And I said, I'm going to do the self-education project. In my gut, I was like, I'm going to go in a different direction. So I went and I said to myself, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to look for skills. That's the only thing I understand. I was a young dude, didn't really know what I was doing. So I was like, I know I want skills instead of information. And so I had like really little cash. My mom would like throw me 40 euro every now and again. She'd be like, all right, here, we're going to sort you out here, you fucking idiot, dropping out of college and all this. And she would throw me like my 40 euro until I started doing English teaching and all this. She'd be like, get your English teaching, start getting a job so you can pay for this stuff. And I go and I take that cash and I'd go and spend it on writers, or I went to a poet. I remember I went to an opera singer. I went to a jazz singer. I went to a jazz musician, jazz guitarist. I went to a lawyer. I went to a sales guy. I went to public speakers, and I would like literally pay them to train me, to teach me stuff, like make me more skills in this very simplistic way of doing it. And this basically just built up an awful lot of assets with me. I learned an array of things in a very messy way: how to storytell, how to speak, how to write. I remember going to Muay Thai, the boxing, the liftings, these type of things, learn about nutrition, learn about a lot of different things, sort of a Renaissance man vibe, although I definitely don't think I reached those heights, but going in that direction. And over the years, I just got very, very competent. I was somewhat like I was broke at the start, useless, couldn't really do anything. But I started doing English teaching because that was the most available thing to me. And I did it sort of as like a contractor, or I was like freelance, if you want to put it this way. And then eventually over the years, I just got better at presenting. I started to get hired for like tech companies. They started to pay me like 180 euro an hour. So I was like, oh my God, I'm actually doing all right with this. No like credentials or anything like this. And then I started to spin a business out of it, and that started to run quite well. Now it wasn't, changing the world, and it wasn't making me hundreds of millions of dollars, but it was getting me going. I was living. And then eventually I started to build online a YouTube channel and all these type of things. And that really just started to take off then as well. And everything started to flow up. And all these skills that I'd built up at this point were just very, very suitable to the internet age. Because what is the internet? People going up, telling stories, telling narratives, being able to articulate ideas well, all these type of things. And I'm basically competing with a load of people who are in the education system and lack these skills, so they unfortunately were not taught this stuff. So it's very, very easy to stand out. And that's somewhat that's the backstory. That's the lore, if you will.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like there's a lot to unpack in there. And, like I kind of see myself back when I was in university and school as well. And I kind of had that very same feeling. Like I'm not learning anything. Like I shouldn't be here. Like I don't belong here type of thing. But anyway, so you've obviously accumulated all these like skills. So like, tell me what it looks like now in terms of like specifically what you do.
Sweet, sweet. So I guess I'm a bit of a social media influencer, I guess, is the direction I started to go. And because all these skills in the abstract don't turn into results. You need to learn how to apply them properly. It's like if I was an MMA fighter and I was really good at Taekwondo, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be UFC champion. I need to go in and realize how to take my Taekwondo and combine it with boxing and combine it with wrestling. Yeah, all right. I was basically explaining to you my journey into becoming skilled and breaking away from the college system. But of course, I was laying down a caveat then that skills do pay the bills, but skills are not necessarily the whole package. So I was using the analogy of an MMA fighter. You, if you're a really good martial artist and you can do kung fu and you can do taekwondo and you can box, this is great. This means you're very, very skilled as a fighter, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can win a MMA fight or a UFC fight, because that's a special problem in a special arena. So if you want to become a good MMA fighter, you need to actually go and test yourself in MMA, in the real world, in UFC, where they combine all these different skills. And then you realize what skills are actually a little bit bullshit, and you realize how to use skills appropriately and all this. So it's like the laboratory to test everything. And then you might learn that half of your taekwondo is useless, but there's some parts of it that are great, and loads of boxing is great, and then how to wrestle, all these type of things. And so it was a very similar path for myself, where I drop out of college. I go and I start pursuing, poetry writing and stuff like this. And it's like, how practical is poetry writing going to be at the end of the day? Probably not so much. Yet it's not going to be completely irrelevant, I quickly discovered. So I develop all these things and I realize, all right, well, where's a place that I can test them? So for example, going on the internet, communicating with people, like attention's always valuable. So I start talking about topics that I understand. I know quite a bit about Carl Jung and philosophy, and I know quite a bit about psychology and stuff like this. And things actually I was learning in college that I started studying privately. And I am able to tell a really good story and present myself quite well, and I'm artistic and all these type of things. So I start to mix all those together and talk about those on YouTube, and that starts to do very, very well for me. Now, I've also got a good business sense from doing all the English teaching. I understand how to teach. I understand how to work with people. I've got really good interpersonal skills and all this type of stuff. And so I start taking all these things and putting them together with the very, very classic online business, not really following like a plan or anything like that, but just doing the steps as I go. So first, start to gain an attention and an audience and talk about a topic that interests people and hold people's attention and be, stand out and tell good stories, basically. And then over time, I start to get YouTube, the internet is just astounding in how it gets you to interact with people. So I'd start getting offers from other people. I'd meet friends. I'd meet new people that we start working together. And people would call me up to be like, I had, guys running massive businesses calling me up and being like, hey, I want you to be my coach and all this type of stuff. I started then to do this thing where I was doing calls with people. So I started doing free calls with people, and I started to chat with them. And sometimes it was like maybe even therapeutic. People were coming in for things like therapy. I was kind of trying to push it towards something more practical because I didn't want to be a therapist. I'm not sure about being an online therapist, parasocial relationship there and stuff like that. And I started to just do lots of different things where I was following the first principles that I understand. You have a large audience of people, interact with them, come to understand them, and build things that they find useful, services that they find useful, like teach them how to speak better, teach them how to write better, teach them how to think more clearly, teach them the principles of psychology, how to apply to situations that are going on in their lives. And then, of course, you'd get guys who are maybe running businesses or executives in businesses and stuff like this. And of course, these guys can take these skills and actually use them in a very powerful way. So some guys would come into me, they're executives of companies, and they're like, I am terrible at doing presentations. I'm terrible at public speaking. And I'm like, well, I can definitely help you with that, my man. And you get guys in who are running businesses, and they would sort of say, all right, I'm kind of having a little bit of trouble here understanding my audience. Like, this is application of psychology. And so you'd sit down and I'd work with these guys and I'd demonstrate value, just like with the English teaching before. I demonstrated value, and then gradually you get more of a reputation and you get better at it, and you can start to do broader things. And I do the same thing with people like this. And then eventually people are like asking me to come in and make content for them and stuff like this. Sit down and go and build out their YouTube, their content plans, the stories that they're trying to tell. Sit down and help them with the marketing side of things. Executives are calling me up to be their private coach and stuff like this, and it just kind of goes in this direction. And so that's sort of where I'm at right now. And I do like loads of other things. I'm playing around with AI art and all this. It's very, very messy, I'm afraid. I wish I could give you the simple one-liner, the elevator pitch, but it's more just like I'm focusing and constantly being creative and telling stories, and then people get interested in that, and then we find ways that I can offer them products and services as a consequence. Therefore, I don't know, I'm an online internet entrepreneur, I guess, is what I'm at right now. So
It's really
voila.
interesting, man, because, like a lot of people preach like, oh, you just got to do like one thing, pick one thing, get known for one thing. But like in your case, it sounds more like you've just put yourself out there, right? And then you're kind of attracting all these different people who see maybe different value in your skill sets and like say, oh, I would love to learn public speaking from you. I would love to learn this from you. So that's really, really fascinating. And like, so obviously, let's chat about YouTube for a second. So, obviously there's a lot of YouTube channels out there, a lot of people trying to, make it on YouTube, start channels. Like what do you think made, you like quote unquote successful with YouTube?
This is a very interesting question because there's two aspects of this, and I think this actually is a very important theme for an awful lot of people to think about, because you just mentioned the advice where you pick one thing and all this. That's actually not bad advice. Structure is very, very valuable, but things are driven by two forces. So, for example, I have a lot of what you would call soft skills, or a lot of depth or pillars. I'm a very good storyteller. You could get me to talk about the fucking phone book and I'd be able to make it interesting. I've got a very colorful imagination. I've got a broad general knowledge about quite a lot of different topics, maybe not mathematics and stuff like this, but I could talk about like psychology and all these type of things. Very creative. I'm trained in a vast array of skills. As I said, like I was studying poetry at one point. I've done music and everything. So I have a really broad set of very, very useful and powerful skills that can make me interesting in any setting. If I'm talking to somebody in, I'm going down to I'm out with the friends, I can chat to people and tell the story. I can make a YouTube video. I can write. I've got these tools become useful. These skills become useful in any medium. That's important because that just makes it. You're going to win if you have those in almost any direction you take things. If you're good on video, these type of things, it's just, they're so fundamentally powerful. And that's like this big stack of assets that you build up. And you should be developing those your whole life. It's actually education's responsibility to give those to you. I think our education system fails us drastically. So most people do not have these, which is a pity, but it is what it is. Now we're in the era of self-education. So it is your responsibility to try to develop these for yourself because you can, we have these opportunities. Now, let's contrast this though with the things that drive quick success, because the way I've done things are very, very slow. It's taken years. It's up and running now where I'm probably going to have this forever. I'm going to be in a well position for the rest of my life, but it took a long time to get that momentum up. You could definitely look at a more precise way, which is where you sit down and you say, I'm going to pick a niche. I'm going to study the target audience. I'm going to articulate some core narratives that move this target audience. And I'm going to specifically say those over and over again. In that way, you don't have to be super charismatic. You don't have to be the best storyteller. You don't have to be any of those things because you're precise, which means you're going to penetrate, which means you're actually things are going to work for you. And in fact, with me, that side of things, that precision definitely happened to me at certain points and helped me along. For example, on YouTube, I started to talk about Carl Jung. I started to talk about Jungian ideas, and the algorithm picks that up. And so I start to boom and get loads of attention. And then I start to talk about maybe creativity or Nietzsche. I talk about these different precise things, and it grabs loads of people's attention. Talk about AI, it grabs loads of people's attention. So there are precise things you can focus on. And I find they're very useful short term to focus on. That's like the niche down question. Now, if you want to try become successful, you can do it. You can there's no script for this. You could sit down and approach it very structured and very precise. And certain types of people will be more suited to that. And you can sit down and say, I'm going to get 1,000 people and I'm going to talk about stress for entrepreneurs when they have mental breakdowns from overwork. And I'm going to make this channel that talks about nothing but this. And everything is SEO optimized and all these type of things. And I'm just going to make it very, very precise. And then you might get 10 coaching clients or sell some service or SaaS off the back of that does really, really well because it's very, very precise. Or you could go the approach that I go, where you try to build a brand based on the things that you understand, the personal brand question, and maybe temper yourself a little bit to be very, very focused, but understand that eventually you're going to have to go broad and show off your personality and realize that people actually bind to that. People like somebody who's a variety of different things that they're interested into. And you're just going to have to deal with a problem where you have to make yourself discoverable by being precise and speaking to algorithms and memes as often as you can, but also allowing yourself the freedom to be expressive and to constantly just try to tell really good stories, really, really high quality, be really, really interesting, and literally just move people. People want to be entertained, informed, educated, inspired, empowered, all these type of things. And if you constantly just focus on doing that, and maybe marry it a little bit to precision and structure, you've basically got a winning formula for the long term there that I think is very important.
No, that was awesome, man. That's a really, really good answer. And like, like on that, because you mentioned a couple of times, like understanding like your audience and understanding people, like, like you strike me as a very strategic person. Like, do you have like a framework that you use in terms of like understanding your audience? You just kind of like dive in and like, research pain points, maybe paint the picture
Yeah,
of that.
so this is quite interesting because again, like theoretically, I would definitely sit down and say we should try to understand our audience and we should try to put together a structure and try to strategize things out. So if I'm working with someone now and we're in the fitness game, and the question for him is like, all right, I want to target older men who want to get into longevity. Okay. And he's already got a bit of an audience up and running, but it's like, I want to get older men who are into longevity, working out, joint pain, stuff like this. And so the question is, this idea of longevity, this avatar, the older men, and we want to get them on the pain point of longevity. How do we penetrate precisely into the set of ideas surrounding that guy that would be related to this? This is, you sit down, you think to yourself, do I talk about chronic pain? Is that the pain point that will bring us into that part of that guy's head? Do I talk about getting fat when you're older? Do we talk about erectile dysfunction? Do we talk about things that are not necessarily related to that? Maybe you talk about like driving a fast car and living like a young guy when you're 60 or something like this, and selling that dream a little bit. Do you talk about testosterone replacement therapy? Do you like, how do you get inside this guy's worldview and this guy's reality? And so I'd sit there with this guy and I'd think about this stuff and I'd ponder it and I'd try to set up a plan and all this. But the thing is that your plan is never going to survive contact with reality. I think there's a famous phrase from generals and soldiers where they say, you have to plan, but the second you go into battle, your plan's going to be useless. Planning is essential, but planning is nothing, So you sit down, you make together your structure plan. You say, I'm going to aim for these algorithms, these things. You have to sit down and you have to go and interact with the audience, the people that you're studying. You have to go and you have to throw stuff at them and see what works. And there will be some people who have a natural instinct for this stuff. They'll be able to just hit these things like bullseye all the time or very, very often. But a lot of times you'll just fuck it up. Like you'll just fail. You say certain things that don't work. And then this is where I really think the empathy and the psychology needs to come into it. You have to become very astute at observing people and putting together the categorizations inside your head and learning to understand what you're looking at. So you're starting to get direct feedback with an audience that you're interacting with and thinking about what you're doing. So for example, with me, I start speaking to people about Carl Jung. And that's a really good, precise meme that gets an awful lot of attention that I can do really well. I have an awful lot of knowledge about that. I'm a good speaker. It suits me an awful lot. So I start talking about that. Boom, everything goes fantastic. That's absolutely great. And then over time, I notice you don't want to be the Jungian guy. You don't want to be Carl Jung guy forever because there's more to me than that. And I start to notice that Carl Jung, people who are attracted to Carl Jung tend to be very creative. They tend to be much more open-minded. Like it's a psychological disposition. So I start to realize that I'm speaking to highly open-minded, creative people. That's like the avatar that I'm speaking to. And that was not something I went in planning to look for, but I saw it, which allowed me to realize, oh, God damn, that's who I'm actually talking to, which allows me then to sort of say to myself, damn, well, what would a creative person be interested in a general way? Instead of me having to talk about Jung all the time, what are other things that we could talk about? What are different directions that we could go, different things that we could explore? And that just opens up more possibilities and opens up more angles and allows you to see things from a different way. And so this is the more, in the trenches approach that allows you to show things. And it's weird. It's like creative thinking versus structured thinking. If you sit down and you have a structured plan, sometimes that can get in the way of creating. Whereas if you go in without intention, if you're daydreaming, sometimes your best ideas just come in the shower, that type of thing. So it's very similar to this. Like if you go and you build an audience with the intention of attracting them, obviously have some structure and aim for valuable people that you want out. Don't be like, don't be butting your head off walls to try to get attention or something like this. But as long as it's decently good, you'll usually get an audience, and then you can sort of reverse engineer why they're listening to you and what they're interested in and study them. I also did this then when I wanted to really monetize the channel. I decided to do loads of free calls. I was just talking to an artist friend of mine. I got him to do the same thing. And I was like, just sit down. I remember doing this, man, for like 3 months, and it was so much work. Oh my God. I sat down and I picked up the phone and let everybody book from my calendar for free. And I'd sit down and I talk to them. And this is it. I just talk to them. And I'd be like, what's going on? How's the crack? Why'd you follow me? What's going on in your life and all this? And the amount of knowledge I got, I've never even been able to capture all the great ideas I got off that because there's just so many. It was just endless stacks like, skyscrapers high of just information and stuff that you can see and patterns that you constantly see. And there's no way I could have guessed that. There's no way I could have planned that stuff out. So that was very, very valuable. This also goes back to the old marketing principle of like a focus group and stuff like this. So, yeah, it's a combination of those two styles of thinking I think are very important.
Yeah, so it's like the in the trenches sounds like, you're just kind of going in, putting stuff out and, seeing what sticks and then like learning from that. But like on the monetization subject, like because obviously there's a lot of creators out there who like make no money, right? Like why do you think that is? And like what's like a simple thing that they can actually do to make money?
Yeah, this is a hard one, man, because I don't know, is it a structural thing? Um, I look back at films and the era of Hollywood, and most creators were broke then as well. Like this is maybe an eternal archetype. First of all, like maybe just being someone who's going to be entrepreneurial and creative, you're going to risk poverty. Like that's a part of it. But even I look back at like the Hollywood days, and if your film, your script got taken and turned into a film, you would make lots of money. It'd be an amazing opportunity because there was such a small amount of media that if they were going to pump your film, a lot of people were going to see it. It had a great potential to scale. Now I see it seems like YouTube and all them, they bring you up for free and they're kind of monetizing your work, which is, a bit of a toxic relationship there, but it is what it is. And if you're going to go up as a creator, you're good at getting attention, you're going to be very suitable for YouTube. You can go up there and you can grab people's attention, grab people's focus. But that skill of being able to grab people's attention is not the same as having a business sense about how to monetize that attention, how to do something with that, even how to offer people services and stuff like this. And worst, if you're going to be going up there and trying to get attention, you're not even going to be that have enough time to sit down and think about putting together a business and all these type of things. And so creators who tend to be good at meeting people, and often they give amazing amounts of value, they just don't have the sense, the sus for this other side of things. It's like a skill thing, they don't, and sometimes they have belief systems that don't allow them to look into this. Like, it's boring to get interested in money. Like that's even worse. That's probably one of the worst ones I see. And so they're stuck then and they're like, all right, I can get loads of attention. I'll just try sell a supplement. I'll try affiliate for a t-shirt. I'll do a merch brand. I'll do Patreon. They try all these type of things and they can sometimes get cash off them, but they'll be stuck like scrounging away at like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 or something like this. And they're kind of just a little bit restricted with that. And that becomes a very big issue, And if they wanted to build something more real, they would have to think to themselves, well, what can I do? Like what's a better thing to do? And of course, this actually comes down to the question of business savvy. Like if you're going to offer people something that they want to buy, that's a different question than getting their attention. And this is a very difficult one. And in order to build a business, it's a huge project. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do coaching. Coaching is a fantastic one for any creator who is intelligent and has skills that they can offer to people, or they're good at solving problems. And of course, this is it. Like if you've got an audience and you think about what problems do they have, how can I solve them? You could do like me, just offer them all calls for free, and then see what problems they have that they think you can help them with. Try to solve some of them. When you solve them, you now have confirmation that it works and you can actually build products for them and offer them things that they can do. And also then there's like other sides of it. Look at More Plates, More Dates. Derek from More Plates, More Dates on YouTube. He runs this like testosterone clinic and he has the supplement line, Gorilla Mind and all this. And they're really well put together, incredibly professional businesses that take a huge amount of time to do properly, I'm sure. Now, this is important to keep in mind because he is running a very high quality company and his YouTube channel, he monetizes the YouTube channel off that company. That company helps him do this type of stuff, but he's not like dicking about, he's actually got a legitimate business underneath him as well. So really, if people want to like learn to monetize, they have to understand that it's a skill set, a whole area of discipline that they need to study. And it'd be great if they could find a partner that could do this with them. But if they can't, or even if they are, they should, study, dot the I's and cross the T's with this a little bit, because it's a big deal. It's an important part of what they're trying to do. And an awful lot of people just simply overlook it, I'm afraid. And then they end up like in the creator economy, good at getting attention, but broke. And that's a horrible place to be.
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me in there, that was incredibly valuable, but like, finding out what your audience's problems are, right? Literally, like one of the things I learned from my first mentor is like, all you need to do to start a business is like find out what people want, go out there and get it, and then sell it to them, right? Or give it to them, whatever that may be. And so I think, yeah, like people think, oh, I'm going to create this clothing line. as an influencer. Like, I think it's just such a generic, dumb idea that's not well thought out. It's just like a quick cash grab. Whereas if you actually take the time to figure out what are their problems, what are they struggling with, what keeps them awake at night, then it's like a lay down sale, right? So yeah, I love the fact you actually took that time to, you know, do all those calls. I'm sure it would have been hard work, but no doubt, you know, obviously paid off tremendously, I'm sure, in multiple ways, definitely.
Yeah, it was very valuable, you know, and it's very humbling, first of all, because it's just numbers on screens before that. It's surreal. Like, you get 250,000 people listening to you. That's so difficult to conceptualize. The human brain isn't able to understand an abstraction like that. So that's 5 football pitches of people listening to you talk. 5 football pitches. There's no stadium in the world that's big enough to hold 250,000 people to listen to me talk for an hour. You know, millions of views you get on other places like TikTok. Like, it's just absurd with the millions of views you get. You're like 8 million views in a video. You're like, what the hell? But this is really important to understand, because you look at that and you can't conceptualize it. And then you go and you pick up the phone and you realize that every single one of those is a person who has been listening to you, and you sit down, you chat to them, and you're like, oh my fuck, like that's absurd. It's surreal. It's really hard to handle as well. I don't think people are designed to be able to deal with like more than 150 people, you know, like you can't really install that many people inside your life. So you go and you talk to all these people and you have like hundreds, thousands, like, you know, I've definitely worked with over 1,000 people now at this point. And it just melts your mind. It's just so much. And you're getting all this mental energy, and there's definitely like an energy exchange going on. And then some people are not in the best state. You know, some people are sick. Some people have like genuinely difficult problems. They're carrying a heavy energy with them. Sometimes it's like a negative energy, and that all rubs off on you. There's no way to escape that stuff. Like, it gets installed inside of you, and it's tough, man. It's really, really tough. And but it's unbelievably valuable, because you get to see inside who they are. There's things you can't guess this stuff. You also have to develop this attitude where you're going to go in and explore in a sort of authentic way and listen to people. And this is a great practice to teach you to empathize and see what's going on with these people. And yeah, it gives you all these like brilliant ideas and shows you so much about what's going on. So it's just an amazing experience. It's a unique experience as well. Like, it's quite a weird one. I don't think many people get to experience in their life. And it's the core of doing this stuff properly. Like, empathy. It sounds a little bit soft, you know, like it definitely our world, I think, could do with less softness on some level, but without doubt, empathy leads to some of the highest success. It's such an interesting paradox that, like, you know, the cutthroat, ruthless world of business, you take in the virtue of empathy, and it's often the magic ingredient that makes everything work. And all the structures and all that type of stuff, very valuable and important, but sterile without this. And once that's in there, even a bad structure can actually pull it off. And a great structure with empathy is just like the perfect winning condition.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, what was the biggest takeaway from those thousands of phone calls?
Yeah. Fuck. I would go in with people an awful lot, and I would notice, this is like a cynical takeaway, that people don't want to study skills to empower them. They want to find reasons that they are upset and they are struggling. They want to sit down and they want to theorize. They want to think about a story about the nature of the world. They want to tell them some narrative. And I think this is important, because we're all trying to figure out identity and what's going on in history and all this type of stuff. But the core emotion that I think heals most people is empowering feelings of being able to do stuff. So, for example, I'm competent. I'm able to go out into the world, and I'm able to build myself an income producing asset that means that I'm no longer going to have to worry about money or something like this. That the capacity to do that calms your emotions down. The ability to do that gives you confidence. You're able to go and build yourself tools and things that are going to give you this sense of confidence in yourself, and calm down your emotions and put an awful lot of this stuff aside. And a lot of people really struggle to stay committed to that. A lot of people aren't serious and professional. A lot of people aren't focused on these type of things. Their emotions come in and they dominate them. Their sadness, their anxieties, their fears, their confusion. These emotions swamp into them and they torture them all day. And then they can't clearly see these simple actions that they could do that would actually change their situation fundamentally. And so they get caught trying to deal with their emotions. And I've seen this in people who are looking for therapy, the people who are not even aware that they need to build things. and they're lost in the realm of their emotions. Like they're usually in a quite a bad state. But I've even seen this in business people, business people, because we're all, our emotions occupy us all the time, and people get caught up in focusing on the wrong things. They focus on, oh, chat GBT's here, do I have to change my entire business to suit this because of fear of the future and all this? And it's like, bro, what the fuck are you doing? Like, your business works perfectly fine as it is. Maybe you should double down on the principles that are already working. You could maybe cut some of the hours out of your business and focus on the right things and the pillars that are holding it up, and cut down to the lean, mean fighting machine that makes this thing run, and not get caught up with these emotional, like, don't try add an NFT to your business. Don't try get caught up in crypto, or don't be so jaded and demoralized that you have to work on this project this type of way. Like, there's all these things that come into it where your emotions are getting in the way of your clear decision making and whatnot. And I constantly saw that. I saw man's war with his emotions, the passions as they torture man, and our incredible difficulty in figuring out what's going on with that. And then the flip side of that as well is the question of creativity. Like, I think creativity heals a lot, and a lot of people really struggle with that, actually, for skill reasons as well. But also like a fundamental ethos. Like, a lot of people just don't want to generate things creatively. Now, maybe that's like a genetic thing where people aren't made for it, but that's something I saw too. So that might be my biggest takeaway. But I saw other things too. But I think that was a big one.
Oh man, that's fascinating. Like, I think, yeah, we like it's kind of cliche, but like having a reason why, like, really, it. What do they say? It's like when you have a like strong enough why, the how becomes irrelevant. And I think a lot of people are like using their emotions as like a cop out from what you said, and like not actually looking at, okay, like, why is this happening? What can I actually do to solve it? And it's just like, I don't know, it's almost like comfort in emotion, right? Like, they get addicted to that feeling, whether it's like anger, frustration, resentment, and then it just manifests in all these different ways. And someone like you and I could pretty much just look at someone walking down the street, and you could tell, like, just in 1 second, like, you could look at their energy, their eyes, and like, you'd be able to see, okay, this person's, going through some stuff, which is, yeah, it's interesting. But Steph, what's like a one sentence piece of advice that you'd, give to someone starting out on their entrepreneurial or creator journey?
God, one sentence. You can tell I'm not a concise man sometimes. I think, since we're in the age of the internet, tell more stories and tell better stories. Focus, don't ignore structure, but put that stuff aside a little bit. I go on the internet now. Look at me doing caveats already. So that's sort of my one sentence. Now, in terms of like, I go into Twitter, you see an awful lot of people talk about things like growth strategies. Or I go onto YouTube and you see an awful lot of people complaining about the world and stuff like this. And it's so hard, and YouTube's changing algorithms and all this type of stuff. And it's like, look, this internet thing is connecting human brains to each other. And human brains respond to well put together narratives. And the art of articulating a narrative and a story is, first of all, you need to be telling a real story that moves people. That's like sort of like the unquantifiable truth side of things. But then after that, the kind of technicalities of it is like sitting, saying like, how do I construct these stories? How do I speak these stories well? How do I present these stories well? And get this stuff inside people's heads. And I think if you focus on this, and then take these stories that you can come up with and apply them to the structures you're going to put in. Like, how do I adapt this to Twitter? How do I adapt this to YouTube? How do I adapt this to Instagram and all this type of stuff, and TikTok? I think that allows you to have this very, very healthy, long-term creative process that allows you to generate quite a lot of value all the time, and say stuff that's very authentic and meaningful for people, that actually moves them, tell narratives that they actually need, and then also have something that's effective that actually works long term. So you're not just ranting on Twitch like a live stream and not getting anywhere. So that would be my advice.
I love that, man. I love that.